Alright guys, TacticalRab again today. Hope you're doing well and enjoying your day so far. For the past several years, really since the start of the CDL era, snaking has been a topic of discussion almost every single year. A lot of that comes down to the main man, Cellium, who introduced it a few years ago and doesn't seem to ever want to stop. Cellium though gives his thoughts on the matter and says, look, I wouldn't use it if it wasn't in the game, therefore it's on the developers to get rid of it rather than the players to GA it. Will they consider this to be a good idea going forwards? And is Cellium really saying that he would prefer snaking not to be in the game? Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I'd greatly appreciate it. Plenty to discuss. Firstly, just wanted to comment on this from Midweek. We mentioned this briefly yesterday, and Ben agrees in the replies that kind of using that bounty match money to go to something else would make way more sense. Because we mentioned yesterday there was discussions from Parasite and others that what if we just get rid of the league matches? Do we even need league matches? Instead of league matches, let's do a weekend tournament where the placings for the tournament are rewarded with points, and then you go into the actual LAN tournament at the end of the month, and then you play on LAN with a crowd, all that stuff, whereas you play like a 2K tournament. So back in the day, 2K, $2,000 or 2K pro points, whatever they used to give out at the time, but you know, they'd put a bit of money on the line for these weekly tournaments that they would do, 2Ks, 5Ks, stuff like this, and they were incredibly good to watch for the fan perspective. It was really interesting, let's just say early Advanced Warfare, that OpTic were winning a lot of the online 2Ks, but then when they got to LAN, you never really knew, was it going to translate, how was it going to go, rather than just playing a load of random weekly matches with random schedules. Like, this is far better to play and to watch. However, the issue with getting rid of all the league games is the players, or the teams, have theoretically paid a certain amount of money to get their brand shown on the broadcast, and therefore this is why they don't want to do an Alpha and a Bravo stream, really, is because they would put the less important game on the Bravo stream, therefore said team on the Bravo stream might not be so happy that their brand, their sponsors, don't get shown on the broadcast. So, it's a bit of a controversial one. Obviously, if the franchising never happens, this wouldn't be an issue, but of course it is. So maybe the solution, though, is to have both of these going on, to have the league matches as they are on the weekends, and then midweek run the occasional 2K tournament. Now, JB Chris says do this weekly. I mean, this would be phenomenal. Could you imagine every week on like a Tuesday night, there was a 2K tournament going down, $2,000 on the line, and all the pro teams would play, and the CDL doesn't even have to broadcast that. They probably should, they probably would if this is to be the case, but they could just say, hey, Scump do the watch party, Zuma do the watch party, all the players can stream their own PFVs. Like, that would get more viewership on a random weekday night than the actual league matches would, I'm pretty sure. And maybe therefore the CDL would want to stream it, but yeah, something like that. I know that some of the teams would be like, well, you know what, we're playing on the weekends and then we're practicing in the week, and then we lose practice time by playing another tourney midweek. But if anything, the tourney is better practice than just playing scrims, I would guess, at the very least. So yeah, I don't know, it's just interesting, right, that if they put, let's say, 5K on the line every week, or even 2K on the line every week for one of those tourneys, like, they would spend less money than all these bounty games. I think they're spending, 120 grand on these bounty games over the next couple of stages. They could put that towards something that would be way more impactful, I think, for the players and for the fans, and would actually inspire some interest in. So I don't really know why they've continued with bounty matches, because I thought it was maybe not a failed concept, but I felt like after they did it before, it was like, this didn't really add anything, so they brought it back for some reason. And it does feel, to me at least, this would be a much better spend of that money, and any step towards kind of what we had pre-CDL is always going to be potentially kind of nice. So we'll see how that goes. If I'm sure there's going to be changes to the CDL in the coming years, just given the state of esports right now, so we'll see how things happen. Also on Pro 8 though last night, so this was one of the set of Pro 8s going on, but also Methodz decided to get involved, former pro player for the Boston Reach, and was absolutely fried the competition. He played up against three current pro players. I believe Vivid was also on this team, but Slasher, Kremp, Skies, and Vivid, and Methodz was having his way with them. So yeah, did he retire too early? It's pretty funny stuff, I thought. It's nice for players like Methodz, right, that after they've retired, they can still have a good time and enjoy playing a game at a high level and don't have to worry about the stresses, because I think Methodz made it quite clear after he retired that just witnessing, we can even see the snakes coming in here, we'll discuss that in a second, but he didn't really have the drive and the ambition in the same way that the younger guys coming in did, and that's one of the reasons why he decided to step away. But as he says, like I never left, 31 in 22 he goes here. On this map, puts these guys in the dust with Arcitys, Standy, Shotzzy as his teammate, and Vivid, Sky, Sasha, Kremp on the other side. Yeah, 31, 22, 13 defends. Great map for Methodz, and obviously gets it all over Twitter, and I thought this is good for aBeZy as well, where he's, a little bit concerned here, aBeZy, after replacing Methodz not long ago, that maybe his job is under threat because Methodz is going to make the glorious return to the starting Boston team. And even as Jacob says, where was this when you played? Because Methodz wasn't exactly the most impressive player for the majority of this season. And, you know, Clay and Jacob are kind of having a go at City in the replies. And Sid's like, look, 2 old haters raided on this parade. Insane out of you two. Really upset about this. So, you know, unfortunate stuff for them. But also, we've got to talk about the movement on the other parts of the game and what Methodz is up to quite briefly there, which was the snaking mechanic. It's become a problem year after year, really since, I mean, look, back in the day it was a thing as well, but since Infinite Warfare came around, snaking was a key problem in the game mechanics itself, but also Cellium really started to come along in Infinite Warfare. Back in Black Ops 3, he was around. I remember Cellium used to do 1v1 chals against pros. A lot of the pros thought he was keyboarding actually, or effectively cheating, and I remember like Machilla would do a 1v1 against Cellium on Stronghold, would lose, and then he would be like, oh, we got to get formal in here to take this guy down, because none of these guys who are like, you know, mid-tier pro players could beat Cellium in a 1v1 hardpoint, and a lot of them were like, we got to bring formal in, the big guns, to try and actually stop this guy, and that was really when he came about. But then in Infinite Warfare, Cellium was very much getting acquainted with the snaking mechanic. He was actually banned from playing 8 that year. I think they thought he was keyboarding, but also because his snaking was probably just too egregious. But then the other pro players started to abuse it, and we saw this period during Stage 1 of Infinite Warfare where snaking was everywhere. It was even more broken in that game than it was in this game. If you snaked behind a head glitch, they couldn't even see you. The movement models were just that broken. Now, halfway through the year, the pros decided, you know what, this is ridiculous. It's making the game awful to play and to watch. Like, let's just GA the snaking. Now, Cellium at that time wasn't a pro, and the pros actually successfully agreed to stop using this exploit, and the rest of the year played much better with pros not really snaking. Now, okay, there was the occasional thing where someone would lay down and stand up again, and people would be like, oh, you know, did the guy snake me? But I don't think it was ever particularly intentional. And the pros back then actually had the integrity and the commitment to uphold that gentleman's agreement, and it actually worked for the year and for the upcoming years until Cellium arrived on the scene pretty much back in Black Ops 4. And since then, Cellium has not really wanted to stop snaking. Right? It's been a big discussion, Modern Warfare, certainly Cold War, where this really kicked off again. And Slasher, when he was on LA Thieves at the time, and Kenny on that team, wasn't happy about Cellium snaking a lot. Apparently, the team even asked Cellium to like, hey, stop snaking because they're going to blacklist us from scrims. Cellium was like, nah, I ain't doing that, broski, and it just carried on as usual. And now over the last few years, it's developed into a point where everyone does it, and it's almost celebrating in a weird way, where they're like, oh, that's good form, whereas a few years ago, it would be, you know, harshly criticized. So Cellium was asked his thoughts on this by Methodz on the breakdown and says, look, snaking's obviously an issue in the game, but fundamentally, you can't GA it. You're not going to be able to stop a pro player doing it. If someone goes pro and picks up a weapon, stands up again, someone's going to consider that to be snaking, therefore they're going to do it back, and it all descends into chaos, which might be a fair point, but they did kind of do this a few years ago successfully. Now, maybe nowadays, the pros are kind of different to what they were back then. But Cellium also says the point, well, like, look, it's not our fault that the game can be exploited in this way. It's frankly the developer's problem to fix it, and saying that, look, the devs have just got to get this job done, and it's their responsibility, which does kind of imply that Cellium actually wants it gone.
I mean, you might have the best form when it comes to snaking.
Nice.
I mean, you're definitely up there. Talk to us about that whole sort of agenda that snaking started with you, and walk us through it.
Well, in my opinion, I don't think it did. I mean, like in my head, I don't think you can GA snaking. I think you can GA the excessive snaking, but if like five round, like I get to round 11 and someone like pop up snakes to you and like can't really do anything about it. Like it's 5-5, it's like over pretty much. You know, like if someone snakes 5-5, it's over. You can't really GA it. It's a thing in the game. So I think it's up to the devs to fix that. But
correct.
I mean,
the devs.
I mean, yeah, that's my take on it pretty much.
Don't hate the player.
Hate the game.
Hate the game.
Correct.
Maybe give us a nice little. Well,
When did it start like making its grand turn? Was it after
whenever Cellium came back to the league? Literally, whenever Cell joined the league, it started getting out of control.
Oh, that'd be before.
Yeah.
So I think Cellium is fundamentally correct. A lot of these kind of exploits in the game, and there are quite a few in glitches, in an ideal world, should be fixed by the, you know, developers themselves. It shouldn't really be on the pros to come to an agreement together to say, all right, we're not going to use this. If it's in the game, players are going to use it to win, especially nowadays with all the money and the importance. I mean, it was important back in the day, but, you know, it does seem like integrity's gone out of the window a little bit, and the players in general are more inclined to just use whatever whatever they can to try and do the best they can. And even Formal said a while ago that, yeah, ever since Cellium came in, he was really who introduced the snaking to Call of Duty. But fundamentally, it's a game mechanic, right? If they added a cooldown on the crouching in the game, for example, if you tried to go prone and stand up again, you could do it maybe 2 times, and then it would, you know, your character would get tired like you do in CSGO. That would probably be an excellent idea. Even Slasher has given his thoughts on this recently in various glitches, where he says, my stance is very simple. All exploits should be fixed or GA'd. It's never changed. So, you know, I think he's probably correct. Now, whether you can actually GA the snaking like you did back in the day, probably not nowadays, just given how the way things have gone. And Cellium obviously is committed to using whatever is in the game to the maximum of his advantage. You can't really blame him for it. Someone was going to do it at the end of the day, right? There was going to be some player. If Cellium didn't come along, I'm sure there would be another player that would come along over the last few years that would have done the same thing as Cell and used everything to their advantage. And Cellium obviously isn't just good because of the snaking. His mechanics are good, his ability is good, his kind of understanding, his awareness is good. So there's other factors where if snaking was gone, I don't think Cellium would all of a sudden become a bottom tier player. And in terms of pure snaking proficiency, Cellium is up there. He's probably top 5. But there's other players that like to even maybe a Drazah or an Afro. You watch them do this thing, you're like, damn, these guys are actually built different in terms of how they could exploit this mechanic. And maybe there is a slight skill gap there, although it's frustrating to watch and to play. So do the developers know how to remove this? Will they remove this? And if they did, would Cellium find another way to try and get around it, right? Because that is, well, the type of thing that these type of players like to do. So tweet your thoughts in the comment section below. Also, speaking of, well, Cellium as well, before he really came into this Simp aBeZy duo, they had quite some success before him, and they are 154 in 54 all-time in series as a duo, which is, you know, in their first 208 series, that's pretty impressive stuff. It's quite similar, actually, to Aches and TP, another legendary duo from back in the day, but then the trio of Scump, Formal, Crimsex, unbelievably dominant. I mean, 154 in 54 is impressive, but 171 in 37 is even more ridiculous, right? So, yeah, it's kind of insane how dominant some of these various duos have been in COD history. And speaking of maps, as we did yesterday with the Black Ops 1 snow maps, wanted to mention some actual realistic options here to come into Modern Warfare 2, because we're expecting for next season, they're going to add in all the original Modern Warfare 2 maps to the game. And we're expecting that to completely overhaul the map pool that we currently play on. So these are 4 options here that are probably going to be added into this game at some point in the near future. This, of course, is High Rise. This came back, I believe, in Advanced Warfare as a map called Skyrise that they actually played briefly at the end of the game's life cycle, maybe just in Search and Destroy. This, I don't know if it's going to work, but maybe this can work for Hardpoint. I think it probably can. Search and Destroy, I think High Rise has always been kind of a classic. Terminal as well, what a map, right? This was played for Capture the Flag, for example, back in the day. I'm not exactly sure how it would work for the respawn mode here, Terminal, but I'm sure they'll give it a go. A legendary map. Favela, I'm not so convinced, to be honest. I know that like Domination and stuff used to be played on this competitively back in the day, but it was more of a pub map from my perspective, Favela. And Scrapyard was another very, you know, highly rated competitive map, really. I mean, like Demolition and stuff, I feel like used to be played on this a fair bit as well, or maybe it was Headquarters. So, I don't know. I'm sure they can find a way to make it work, but some of these OG maps, I'm sure, should play better than what we presently have. And hopefully that will prove to be the case. But very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care, and I'll see you next time.